is a cult? Generally, it's a small and often secretive group of people that harbor an intense emotion, most likely obsession, with a person, idea, or beliefs. Sometimes that includes deities. Other times that would be demons. This time, it's the classic demon cult, and they made a little something called the Necronomicon Ex Mortis. Sound familiar? Remind you of a specific zombie franchise that came into place because they couldn't contain their curiosity? That's right, I'm talking about the Evil Dead franchise, and the cult in this case, that would be the Dark Ones. Those who have seen only the movies may not have heard about this specific cult, but they're technically the people behind all the drama happening in the entirety of the franchise. I'm talking about the comics, the movies, and the TV show, Ash vs. Evil Dead. Also, did you know these guys are from the DC universe? Well, that's a story for another time. For now, let's get into another cult, the Dark Ones. Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin. Overview. The Dark Ones go by many names, such as the Ancient Ones or the Great Old Ones, but the Dark One seems to be the most popular name, so we'll go with that. These dudes are from every part of the Evil Dead media except for the movies. They were introduced in the comics before making their official debut in the TV show Ash vs. Evil Dead episode Books Beyond. They can be described as neither fully human nor fully demon, which oddly enough makes sense because they literally worship the dead. Selling their souls to the devil, I'm honestly not surprised. However, they're depicted as humanoid entities dressed in dark hooded cloaks. According to the Necronomicon, their true images are unfathomable and would drive humans mad. One of the most important characters you'll have to keep in mind is a Dark One called Ruby Nobi. She's the writer of the Necronomicon Ex Mortis, a decision that still haunts Ash to this present day. She also has a separate ability to shapeshift into a human woman, which would allow her to merge into the human masses seamlessly, with no risk of getting caught. In this video, we'll be talking about their appearance in the comics first, then go into their show debut, where they actually do some damage. Well, minus Cthulhu, but we'll get into that soon enough. Comics. The Dark Ones are mentioned significantly in the three comics, Army of Darkness vs. Reanimator, Evil Dead 2 Cradle of the Damned, and Evil Dead 2 Dark Ones Rising. In Army of Darkness vs. Reanimator, the Dark Ones are mentioned for the first time in the DC universe. They were imprisoned in the famed Arkham Asylum before they were summoned by Herbert West and his mentor Dr. Whately. This opened a portal that allowed the Dark Ones to leave Arkham Asylum, not only undetected, but also directly to the summoned area. However, while leaving through the portal, Ash managed to get his hands on the Necronomicon and destroy it. This had harsher consequences than expected, but that caused the entire asylum to crash on itself. Evil Dead 2 Cradle of the Damned is part of a mini-series of comics where the Dark Ones are mentioned again. This is where we meet Simulacrum Ash. Simulacrum Ash is a copy of Ash made by his severed hand and Annie's blood through a continuous cast of spells. However, unlike a canonical version of Ash from Ash vs. Evil Dead, which is made from just his severed hand, Simulacrum Ash is a good guy, a hero. Anyway, Annie and Simulacrum Ash got sucked into the Deadlands, which is a mirror dimension, but all the Dark Ones and other such creatures are sent there. There, they meet a man called Rigardi, who had been trapped there since the beginning of the 20th century. He could have tried to escape earlier, but his soul had already been taken by a Dark One, so he was pretty much stuck there for all of the eternity that he had left. Poor Rigardi. Evil Dead 2 Dark Ones Rising is also part of the same mini-series that Cradle of the Damned is from. This is where we see a Dark One actually make an active move toward creating chaos. However, the Dark One that we see here isn't any old cultist, but the one, the only, the terrifying Cthulhu. This eldritch horror wormed its way through a sinkhole, one that was made to function as a bridge between the real world and the Deadlands. Honestly, why would they need bridges to places like the Deadlands when no one's ever going to go there? The only people the Deadlands eagerly housed were the Deadites and Dark Ones, and even those people were only there because they were banished. Cthulhu, being Cthulhu, started sucking the souls out of everything and everyone in the nearby areas the moment he got out of the sinkhole. Annie and Simulacrum Ash banded together to summon other souls. Unleash is the right word actually. Of those that were considered the most powerful voodoo sorcerers of the previous century. These souls then merged together to become Dambella, the creator of life, and the complete opposite of everything that Cthulhu stood for. Dambella managed to defeat Cthulhu, and all was well for a bit. Annie and Simulacrum Ash, tired out from the summoning, went around to find some place to eat and recharge, but got a rude awakening instead when Cthulhu's hand popped out from underground and crushed both of them. Turns out they never left the mirror dimension, aka the Deadlands, and were still stuck in the Eldritch dimension. The entire thing that just happened, it was in fact a setup to figure out if souls from Earth were deemed worthy enough for the taking, and Annie and Simulacrum Ash were the perfect guinea pigs to test that out. Ash vs. Evil Dead. Before we get into the crap they did in the present, let's get into their formation in the past. Eons ago, they invaded Earth and pretty much caused tons of chaos with their so-called godlike powers. With all the horror they caused and the fear they brought into the hearts of the humans, humanity ended up in their mercy. That is, until Ruby Nobi. I told you to remember that name earlier in the video, right? That's to understand now. Now, Ruby Nobi was also known as Mulier Demonium de Igne, which translates to Demonic Woman of Fire in Latin. She wanted to power the Necronomicon, along with the powers of all evil, to be her sole weapon and only her weapon. So she banded together with a necromancer named Kaya and, betraying her brotherhood with the Dark Ones, banished them to the Deadlands. Now, all power relating to evil was both hers and Kaya's to command. Coming back to the present, it's been millennia since then. We go straight to Season 3, which opens to a rift. Now, for those of you who don't know what a rift is in this context, it's a phenomenon, for lack of a better word, where the magic form seal that keeps the Dark Ones imprisoned in the Deadlands begins to weaken, and the portal that would allow them to leave starts forming. Pretty much what happened in the first comic book issue, but there's no one to speed up the process in this case. Where does it form? Funnily enough, that would be in the cellar of Ash's hardware store. This was actually foretold by the Necronomicon. Kaya, the necromancer who helped Ruby banish the Dark Ones to the Deadlands, was stuck inside the Necronomicon. Well, part of it. The other part was possessing Ash's romantic partner, Kelly. What happened on that day was that she had lost her body to the Necronomicon's destructive power, and her soul ended up getting stuck with the Necronomicon. The prophecy read, "The Dark Ones will ultimately be unleashed from their dimensional prison and walk upon the Earth, and the prophesized one will stop them." And who was the prophesized one, you ask? Why, Ash Williams, of course. Kaya, wanting to warn her friend, tipped Ruby off about the prophecy. Ruby didn't want to get caught by the people she once considered her brothers, so she thought of a plan. That was to pretty much steal the powers of the prophesized one and transfer them to herself and her offspring. No, not her child, but a clone of Ash that she would make using his severed hand. The canonical version I mentioned while talking about Simulacrum Ash? Yeah, that one. She felt she would be safe from them. While she was going on and on about this plan, however, the rift was getting stronger and stronger, while the seal got weaker and weaker. Keep in mind, no one knew about the rift, not even Ash. Oh, before I forget, that plan failed miserably. The clone Ash that Ruby made, killed by Ash at the moment of discovery, so now she had pretty much zero defense against the Dark Ones once they arrived. She had no choice, and unless she came up with a better defense plan, she was pretty much toast to whatever revenge they planned to exact from her.
I gotta stop him.
Judgment Day. Ash found out that the rift was in his hardware store cellar, then asked his friend Pablo to stay there and make sure that the rift stayed shut. Pablo was a shaman, so this task he was able to do. He agreed and headed to the cellar, but to his dismay, the rift was already torn open wide, ready for the entrance of the Dark Ones. He tried closing it, but it didn't work. You can't close an open rift. He quickly skimmed through the Necronomicon to try to find a way to close it, but the Dark Ones decided to choose that exact moment to walk through the rift and into the cellar. They reclaim the spells of both the Necronomicon and the ones engraved on Pablo's body, then leave the cellar, with Pablo wondering why the hell he was still alive. Using the help of the Necronomicon, the Dark Ones began their havoc in Elk Grove itself by unleashing evil entities, those we call Deadites. These Deadites either turned others into Deadites or terrorized people who weren't possessed. Back at Ruby's hideout, both she and Kaya had sensed the Dark Ones, realizing that they had finally passed on to Earth. They tried using Zoe's flesh and blood to temporarily mask their presence from the Dark Ones until Ruby could figure out a permanent solution, with Kaya warning her that this world would only delay the inevitable. By the way, Zoe's the sole surviving agent of the Knights of Sumeria, an ancient order of men and women that swore to protect humanity from all forces of evil. This doesn't mean the actual knights are gone, she's just the only one left. However, this bloody attempt at safety is interrupted by Ash, who states that he wants to kill Ruby and get Kelly back. He still doesn't know about the open rift, by the way. He wasn't able to beat them due to their difference in magical prowess and even lost his beloved chainsaw, but he somehow managed to stall them long enough for the Dark Ones to find the two women and barge into their home, ready to take their revenge against the traitress. The Dark Ones first pulled Kaya's soul out of Kelly's body, reversing the magic of the Necronomicon, causing the Book of the Dead to spit out the necromancer's body. They then shoved the soul back in forcefully and burned her, both body and soul, in a hellfire inferno, with Ruby watching helplessly as her partner, mainly in crime, burned in the flames. As a final screw you to her once brothers, she cursed them out, claiming that the prophesized one would get them too. The Dark Ones, both in response and as a final action, stole her soul. This left behind a decalcified skeleton that broke into chunks after being thrown. This pretty much wrapped up their revenge for millennia. Before they could continue with their plan to wreak havoc on the world, they found the Necronomicon missing. Where did it go? Well, turns out that while the Dark Ones, Ruby, and Kaya were having their revenge reunion party, Ash managed to find and steal the Necronomicon, the Kandarian dagger, which is known to be one of their weaknesses, and the soulless body of Kelly, hoping to revive her. He loaded everything into his car and sped away, only to see Brandy and Pablo driving right in front of him. They were pretty much stuck in the chaos that was engulfing Elk Grove, covered in Deadites and terror, driving to warn Ash about the rift. Kinda counterproductive now that the Dark Ones were already here. He didn't want to crash into his daughter and friend, so he swerved a little too hard, crashing into a restaurant. Before he could get out, he was jumped by the Dark Ones. They tossed him out of the car and grabbed the Necronomicon, then fixed it with the remaining pages and spells they got from Pablo. The Book of the Dead was officially fixed and as good as new. Pablo tried to stop them and at least get the book back, but got incapacitated instead. Finally, with the fixed and finished Necronomicon in their hands, they cast a summoning spell and disappeared. What did they summon, you ask? Oh, nothing too big, I suppose. Just a Kandarian demon, over 60 feet. Did I mention he was a demon? Medal of the Man. The Kandarian demon began smashing everything and possessing everyone in sight. There was terror and chaos on one side, and Deadites turning others into Deadites on the other side. Ash later heard that this wasn't the only place where Deadite outbreaks were happening. The Dark Ones were teleporting all over the world and causing their old chaos. He came to the conclusion that the reason the Dark Ones summoned the Kandarian demon was for it to act as a champion of sorts, a champion against the prophesized one. He normally would have risen to the challenge, but there was something wrong this time. There was a huge titanic demon in front of him, causing chaos willy-nilly. People were either dying or turning evil. No matter how much he did to stop them, it wasn't enough. His efforts weren't enough. This started to hit Ash big time, and it hits his morale hard, bringing him into a state of shell shock. Brandy had to step in, cheering him up rather seriously, and with that not working, also giving him some brutal reality checks to get his morale up. To add a little extra positivity, they managed to bring Kelly back to life. The four of them started working together, covering each other's sixes, and engaged the Deadites long enough to run through Elk Grove, which was now surrounded by the National Guard and other Deadites killing each other. They managed to reach the safety shelter managed by the Guardsmen, but now Ash wanted to fight. He was unable to watch humanity fall apart and decided to take one final stand against the demon, much to the dismay of Kelly, Brandy, and Pablo. The government had just stated that they would be launching a nuke in Elk Grove, hoping to wipe the entire town full of Deadites and the demon out. Then again, when has nuclear power ever worked in the face of supernatural threats? The residents of Elk Grove evacuated with the government, along with Pablo, Kelly, and Brandy, but Ash finds the opportunity he needed to take that final stand. He goes back, takes command of a tanker, attaches the Kandarian dagger that he found in Ruby's basement onto a missile, and distracts the Kandarian demon long enough to let the missile fly through the demon's throat. This finally made that fatal blow needed to take the demon down, and the nuclear bomb actually worked on the Deadites. However, Ash was extremely injured and was saved by the remaining Knights of Sumeria, who were hiding underground, moments before the nukes were dropped. He woke up to a post-apocalyptic future and a bionic hand. He hears from the Knights that the Dark Ones have almost won their war, but were waiting to find Ash so they could finally claim victory over humanity after the death of the prophesized one. Marvelous verdict. You know what I say after all that? Take things with a grain of salt, people, and stop picking up and reading things that tell you not to read them. Jeez, there's a reason that people say don't read this, especially if it's written in blood. What's the stupidest decision you've ever made that cost you dearly? Let me know in the comments below. And if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one and be safe. Thanks, everyone.